Well, good day, viewers. Today we have a 2011 F150 Lariat with the EcoBoom V6 in it. It was towed in because it doesn't start. And as you can see, it's running. I went out to the vehicle, put the keys in the ignition, turned the key, and it started. Acted like there was nothing wrong. You don't see any warning lights other than the low tire pressure light on. Customer said they've been trying to start this thing for about a week. Now it has sat for a few days, so I'm going to check to see if there's any codes stored in any computers. Battery was not dead. So I've scanned this vehicle before. I think last summer we did a heater control blend door motor or something. So let's see if it'll auto ID. 107,000 kilometers. That's not very many for 2011. So let's do a code scan and see if there's any. It wants engine on, engine off, key on, engine off. So I'm going to hook up a battery charger. Okay, so we have a clean battery charger connected to it, sitting at 13.1 volts. And we're going to do a network code scan. Please give us something to work with. Well, that's interesting. Huh. I wonder if it thought it was in park. Wasn't that special? Should 22 controllers that quickly? Wow. Well, let's have a look here. We've got some transmission related codes. Possibly the transmission range sensor could have been indicating it wasn't in park. Battery voltage below threshold, control module system internal failure, accessory protocol interface sync, transmitter identification code not current, key and switch circuit short to ground, run start control circuit short to ground, fuel pump primary circuit. Now these two here could be related to an aftermarket car starter if the vehicle is equipped with one. So we'll have to see. Body control module, key in the switch, run, start, fuel pump. Lots to choose from. And of course now it runs, so I don't know which ones are important. I'll have to look at my history and see if it had these key switch codes before when I scanned it previously. So here's a previous scan back in September the 3rd of last year. It did have the transmitter identification code in history in both the anti-theft and body control module, but it didn't have the key switch codes. I'll have to see if this does have an aftermarket starter in it and get a story from the customer as to exactly what happened. Well, checking for cases on the identifics here, this P0705 and P1921 appear to be related to the range sensor, and there's cases of it causing an intermittent no crank. Intermittent no crank, intermittent no crank. So I'm going to check the range sensor, but it's working now because it's obviously starting. So here's some transmission data. Transmission range switch permits starter operation, says true. I got to see the theory of operation of this range sensor. It's not a simple switch by the looks of it. It looks like it produces a varying frequency. I'm going to move the shifter through the ranges. The refresh rate seems very slow on this, so I'm going to build a custom data list. Okay, now I've got 6 data parameters chosen. There's ones off the screen here. Fluid temperature. So I'm going to go through the shift points again from park, reverse, neutral, drive, and so on. Seems to be working okay right now. I tried to get a hold of the customer and I couldn't. So here's the troubleshooting chart for P0705. It says the PCM detected a range sensor duty cycle is within range but does not match the calibrated bit pattern. What will happen is the MIL will come on, engine will not crank, which is what the customer said would happen. It was acting like the starter wasn't working. They tried boosting and it wouldn't go. Default to third or fifth gear if the DTC sets after it's already running, maximum line pressure, and DTC P1702 may set, and I have that 1702. The other code is 1921, P1921. PCM detected a transmission range signal duty cycle out of range. Engine will not crank. 1705 will set. P0706, 707, 708, or 709 may set. Repair the more specific DTC first. Go to pinpoint test C. Well, let's see what that suggests. It seems to be working fine now, so it could be a wiring issue. Pinpoint test C. B. Wow, that worked out well. Let me find this. Okay, so I found that the transmission range sensor is part of this, what they call the lead set, molded lead frame, I should say. That's the connector going through the back rear right corner of the transmission case, and that's got to be the manual range sensor there. Down here it says something about how it works, vaguely of course. Transmission range sensor has a set of Hall effect sensors that have a pattern of on-off states which are dependent on the park reverse neutral drive 3, 2, or 1 position of the manual valve. The range sensor also provides signal for starting system and the reverse lights. Let's have a look at the electrical diagram. So what I'm going to do now, I've realized that this range sensor is part of the lead frame, which is above the valve body or on the valve body, but requires transmission disassembly. At least the pan and the valve body have to come off. I'm going to put it up in the air and we're going to do visual inspection of the wiring harness going into the back of the tranny. I've got the key on, got a battery charger hooked up to it. I'm going to monitor the position and the status of the range switch while I manipulate the wires. Apparently the signal is a pulse width modulated or duty cycled signal. That appears to be the case here. It's in range right now, but it may be an intermittent problem. So we're underneath the vehicle looking at the wiring harness going into the transmission and manipulating it. I've got the scanner key on and the battery charger on it. Let's put that up here. So you can see the connector on the transmission. Wiggling that connector and see if there's any change in the voltage on the scan tool. This thing is quite remarkably dry underneath here, so it's obviously been sitting for some time because we've had a lot of snow in the last few days, and there's no snow under this vehicle, none whatsoever. I'm looking at the wiring harness up here and it looks like it's in its place. Now let's see if that voltage changed on the scan tool. No change whatsoever. Oh boy. Yeah, during all the time that I was recording it in park, it was indicating fine. Well, I'm going to save this recording. There's where I shifted it. to move it forward to put it on the hoist. So the duty cycle changes. So they went back to one wire. Oh well. I guess they feel that being a Hall effect it shouldn't fail, but obviously it can. That seems to be quite common looking at those fault codes. Let's see, what was it? P1921? P1921. Transmission range sensor. Transmission molded lead frame assembly, which contains the range sensor. So that seems to be the fix for it. I'm going to check with the dealer and see if they stock the part. So I just got off the phone with the dealer. It's like $300 for that lead frame assembly or transmission range sensor assembly. And no stock. They don't even know where it's stocked. Said he's got to make some calls on Monday and see if he can even source one. They're on back order. I think he's going to check with other dealers. So we're kind of hooked at this point. I've still got the key on. I'm still monitoring the input frequency and the range duty cycle. I'm going to wiggle the connections at the ECM, let it down, and wiggle the connections at the ECM while I monitor this. So we're back working on this 2011 F150, and I went to start it today. Note the gear shift indicator doesn't indicate what gear it's in, and when I try to start it, it won't crank. So the problem is returned. I have yet to scan it. Try in neutral. Nothing happening. Check engine light flashing, that's interesting. Well, let's scan it and see what codes it's got. Turn the heater fan off here. Now there is a recall on this for the transmission lead frame. Let's do a network code scan. It's minus 28 out here, Celsius. So the range switch code is back, and that's why it won't crank, because it doesn't know what gear it's in. Now that lead frame is recalled for other issues or unintended transmission downshifting, and I talked to the dealership today and they said that they might be able to help this person out, but I got to get it there. So I'm going to see if I can get this vehicle started by hot wiring the starter circuit. So here's a picture of the starter circuit on this F150. The starter relay is in the battery junction box, so we could bypass it there, but we could also bypass it at connector 144. Actually, this would be 192 because this is a 3.5, I believe. So let's see where that connector is. Let's see what it looks like. Is it a single wire connector? No, it's a big connector. Okay, so we're going to go straight to the starter relay instead. Starter relay is in the battery junction box. So we're going to see if we can ID that. So here's a picture of the battery junction box, which is right on top of the radiator under the hood. And the starter relay is the second one from the passenger side of the vehicle. So this relay right here. PCM power relay, starter relay. So we're going to jump pins 3 and 5 at that relay, but we're going to use a jumper. So we're going to try this in place of the relay. It simply plugs in. We're going to turn the key on, see if it'll start. Under the hood here, it'll be this relay right here. That's the starter relay. They're not labeled under the
instrument panel, so I'm going to use this little relay puller here. There's like a little notch in the relay, I think. Yeah, there is. Just got to get in there. All right. Let's put this relay up here. Put the switch in. Can't see in there. It's not pleasant out here, so when I put that switch on, it should crank. Alright, so I'm going to go turn the key on and try cranking it. Here goes, let's see if it'll start. Well, at least it's running now. The transmission's likely going to be in limp mode, but I'm going to let it run to warm up a bit, and maybe the range sensor will start working again. I think it fails when it's cold. So still no gear shift indicator. We got this wrench light. Driver's door ajar because I got the door open and freezing to death out here. Low tire pressure because the tire pressure sensors don't work. So we're going to let it run and warm up. So after running for about a half an hour, 45 minutes, you can see the park indicator is working. Gear shift indicator is working now. And I suspect that if we shut it off, it'll restart. So at least we can get it started by bypassing the starter relay and let it warm up, and then we can drive it to the dealership. So I'm going to send this vehicle to the dealer, and hopefully they can look after it under that recall for the lead frame failure. I know it's not exactly the same scenario. The customer did mention though that they had it downshift at one point for no reason, but there was no evidence of that code when I scanned it. So hopefully they'll look after her and change this lead frame and fix this intermittent no crank condition. I'll post a follow-up when I find out what happens.